You see what I didn't have it on just a second. Let me see. Okay, today's date's 5/11/2023. It's a Saturday, 2023. 5/11/23, and we have Paul E. Ries and Sarah Ries. Paul born 12/16/33. Lives in Mount Vernon. Was a classmate of Charlie Hames, who was a principal there, and later date a chemistry teacher at Wright's Memorial. He's a friend of his. Saw her daughter Sarah brought him today. He was in the service in the Army from 1954 all the way to 56. And then after his basic training in, over at Fort Sill, or basic training at Fort Jaffe, and then did some advanced high-tech training at Fort Sill. He then was moved over to Germany in December 56. So tell us, we got our Sherman tank here at the museum sitting behind you. So you worked, this is a Sherman tank, and tell us, first of all, what you did in Germany with tanks, and was it cold over there, and did you see any Russian tanks and other things? Start.
Well, yes, I arrived in there, rail car, and they assigned me as a mechanic to motor pool there. They had 22 M47 Patton tanks and 2 Sherman retrievers, and I thought maybe this tank here might be a spin-off of the RO retriever. And so I knew I was going to spend the summer and a couple of summers and winters in that tank.
Tell us the difference between a Sherman, a Patton 47 and the Sherman behind it. Tell us the difference of those.
It seems this Sherman tank is a little different than our retriever, because our retriever was cut down a little more, and they put a winch on the front of it. They said it used to be a tank, but it had gin poles on the thing came down, and then the front we had kind of a spud, because to pull a 47-ton tank, we had spin off on these mountains that we went through, because like in February or March, if we got up there in snow on some of those mountains in Germany, we'd have slide offs these tanks. They'd had to pull these tanks up out of the edge of the mountain, and then we mechanics checking to get it going again.
Tell me what kind of truck this is. Behind you is a 67,000-pound tank, so 33 tons. So some of the tanks were this size or even bigger. If the Patton was a little bigger than this, if you're saying 47 tons, it was 10 tons more than the one behind us.
That's right, and they really had a lot of fun. I've got some pictures of a M47 tank. About 2 o'clock at night, when they were pulling this tank, trying to go see, when the tank would break down, we'd take it to an ordnance shop where mechanics said, well, we couldn't handle the motor and stuff, so they had spots where they delivered these tanks. And those retrievers, Sherman retrievers, would pull these tanks, and it'd be dark, and this one went down this mountain, and that 47-ton was right behind that tank, because it just had cables crossing. They had a lot of fun with just neutral steer. You just had 2 levers in those tanks to steer, and when they got to the bottom, they had to make the turn, and then he made that turn, but then he made a left turn, and the guy on the front said, we got another turn. So they had another right turn. Tank got on this, retriever got on that bridge, but it jackknifed. The tank didn't make it. So they stopped there. Well, what am I going to get off? No, you come to the back, because it could be a drop there. By morning, it showed it was a railroad bridge.
Shoo.
Very deep drop down there, and the Germans the next morning didn't like that at all, with a 70-mile-an-hour train going through and a tank overhead. That didn't look too good.
Now this tank, you're saying a retriever, that is something. A retriever, when these things broke down, and a retriever had to be a tremendously strong truck or another tank to get it back to where it could be repaired. Tell us a little bit about a retriever.
Well, the retrievers, we had those, ours I thought had a Ford V8 engine in it. It has a front steer, and it was like the old steer. You just had a brake here, you pulled on it on a neutral steer, and you'd go right and it steer to the left. to hold back 47 tons was, that's all they had back then, in '54. And it was it's a load, but it got the job done. But it was fun. But I told John, well, I'll fix them. You drive it. And a night when we stopped,
when you would drag those things, did you drag it with these grousers on, or
No.
put them on a cart? Because this is very hard to drag this down the road. What would you put them on?
They just rolled down the road. They put those tanks had the Allison transmission in them. They were neutral steer. They were Wisconsin V12, I think 1,800 horse or so, V12 Wisconsin engine, and they had to be full gas before you left, because in the mountains they said, well, you go the fuel by gallons per mile, which is about 7 gallons per mile in the mountains.
And not very much, not good gas. So these grousers would rotate. You put it in neutral gear, and it would roll like a car would roll, and you're
Right.
dragging a car.
Right,
So
in neutral.
it would, in neutral, and it would roll like that.
Yes.
Now, when you were stuck on that bridge, and you could have fallen over, were you on that tank at that time?
No, I wasn't. I just came on that later because John and I, in our retriever, was up the hill. We just wanted to see what was going on there. But to pull that off, you see, when you pull those tanks, it had 2 heavy cables. You cross
Right in front. See the front where we see that? You would, on the front of that, go stand up and show them where you're talking about.
Yeah.
Stand up there, Paul. Show them where that is, where you would put these things. This is a major problem for the Germans in World War II, where they had Tiger tanks and they couldn't get them out of there. So point to where you'd put those cables on those big 2 strong posts up there.
Well, we had those holes there.
Yeah.
Cable would go there, and then it would cross over to this side, and then you had a cable on the other side, and they were cross cables like that. So when you turn, it would pull that tank on around. But it was kind of wild when it was snow on, and dark, and you couldn't see because you didn't have very good lights back then. All you had, and once in a while you had a little German moonlight when the moon come over.
So then you're over there, and it was probably 0 degrees or 10 degrees. It was pretty cool.
About 10 above, something
10,
like that.
yeah, it was real pleasant, huh?
Yeah.
Were your uniforms good enough then, or did you get too cold?
Oh, they made out because you kept yourself warm. We had bunny caps on then, because about like we had some slide off some of the old M47s there. I had a slide off one night, and the guy panicked. He was still down that valley, sliding down. He was about 40 feet down in there, and I said, "Where's John?" Well, John, he was on his way there. I said, "We gotta stop that guy from spinning, or he's going to end up," because that tank, occupation on, we had turret loaded with 90 millimeter live, Willie Peters and HE, all that stuff in there, plus the guy in that tank. And my brother, he was in the Air Force, he said, yeah, his buddy said he just had to bail out of a training plane because the guy froze. I said, I bet he's panicked and he won't stop spinning. So I walked around there to kind of get to him, and I slipped and I started sliding down the hill toward that tank.
On your feet.
On my feet.
Yeah.
I said, I'll just dig it in. No way. 10 above 0. Yeah. And I said, I got to do something. I said, Lord, help me. We got to stop this. And so help me this day. He said, roll, man, roll. I remember looking to the right, and it was dark. I look over here, and here the snow, there was a kind of a bush there that had, the moon had come out behind the clouds there. I saw this gold-looking thing. I said, I got to get over there. I kept spinning my body, and I ended up about 30 feet from in front of that tank there in that bushes. I went up to him and said, shut her down, shut her down. And I looked at him as just like a cow hit with a hot stick. His eyes were about that big around. And I said, John's up the top of the hill with the retriever. Well, I've got to get a cable on you and pull you out. Okay. And
he thought he was dead, yeah.
Oh my goodness. And so I said, gee whiz, I said, how far is it to the bottom of the mountain? I looked around the edge of the mountain there, and I couldn't see nothing but darkness and more. And by that time I saw gasoline was running down the side of the mountain. That tank was leaning over so much that gasoline, I said, gee whiz, we got to stop this. And here's the old boy sitting on, getting ready to light up a cigarette. I said, don't do that. I said, we'll all get in a big flash here. For heaven's sake. I said, John's there, and I met her. You know, been a long time ago, but I got him shut down. I said, how do I get out of here? So I walked up the hill, and I remember seeing John. He had the spud on that retriever. That one, they had a spud they put down to break the winch. Because when you pulling a 47-ton tank with a flea up there, you got to hold that sucker back. He had the spud down, and I said, I don't remember after that, but the rest of it was just regular, ordinary work. You pull a cable and you pulled him up the hill. So
that's not that easy to pull a tank up. That thing, yours weighed 47 tons, and you had to pull it up 90 degrees or probably 45 degrees.
It's about a 45. Cause when I was sliding, cause I remember trying to dig my heel in, I couldn't, cause it was already froze. Cause that tank spinning smoothed everything off the side of that mountain. The best skating wreck you ever had in your life.
Yeah. How did you anchor that retriever?
That retriever. Well, he's got on the front of that retriever. They put a spud down. You see, that's how the tank got through some of those hedgerows in Germany. Yeah. Some guys came up with spears, and then like that. But then on that retriever, then they put a kind of a bucket. I guess I don't remember what kind it was, but it had to go down. And I remember John, he had the thing down, getting ready to get the cable out to go down to get that guy up there, out of there.
With what you're talking
so,
about.
Yeah.
Cool.
Explain the spud to us. Come on up there, Tom. Tell us.
No, that's quite all right. He's doing a
Yeah,
great job.
Okay, so the spud was out to hold it, but then if you held it,
Yeah, they used them in the marine industry too. You spudded a winch so that you could sit there and hold it in place.
hold it in place. But how you going to go forward though if it's stuck?
It's
just hold it.
permanent.
You're
It's
static,
keep
yeah.
from sliding down the hill.
Okay.
Probably what he had to do was winch it part of the way up, and then he had to back up out of the way over the crown of the mountain there.
Yeah.
So he pulled that tank so it would get up front. You see those 47s and that retriever had rubber tracks on it during the occupation. And that's the way we could go through some of those small villages.
Yeah.
Just like we got in a village up ahead there, and what's the crowd up there? There's smoke up in there. What are they burning? Oh Lord, the tank's on fire. I knew it. They didn't clean. Well, what happened, see, there's big hydraulic hoses come to that Allison transmission, and they wore through the metal in there, and it sprayed on the exhaust pipe of that engine, and there it was. And what's going on? Well, we're out of the fire extinguishers. Rish, get over there and see what you can do. Me? All right. Well, hell, it's been burning about a half hour. Oh boy, you got 90 millimeter shell. Gee whiz, okay. What left is there to do? Well, I knew on top of that tank, right over the top of the engine, where the batteries and the fuel is a steel armor deck. All right, you're going to have to pull a Samson here and get that deck plate off.
Go point out where that is on this tank.
On that.
But go point out so we can see that.
Yeah,
Well, move that chair and then go up there and show us. Don't fall down. Point out where you're talking about.
Right
Go,
up here
go on up there. Go up. You don't climb up, but just show us what you're talking about.
Just right behind the turret there was a steel plate.
Yeah. What's that for? We don't have one on this one, right?
Well, that's where your battery was hooked in.
Yeah.
And when they pulled that engine, you took the cannon around to the side, and that way the engine would come out up through there.
Where'd you keep the gas up there? Point to where the gas tanks are.
Well, the gas tank was on this side over here. Had a nozzle, tank lid about like this, because you figured those tanks had a mileage. You measured those in the mountains by 7 gallons per mile.
How many gallons you hold in your tank? About 100?
Ours, we had, I think, about 160 gallons or so, or more on the retriever, because it is a little old Ford V8, 800 horse. And it was neutral steer, just the old gear crash, because we had simple stuff then.
When you pulled your, point over there where you pulled that engine out, you got a big crane to help pull the engine out so you could work on it. Tell us about that.
We'd get 2 different spots there, and that's we'd call in ours and say, all right, we got another tank down. I think it's a transmission hoses, so just we'll get the hoses off, and then we'll see if the transmission's okay.
Yeah.
So then at times we had maybe a final drive was broken. We'd have tank mechanics would have to check the drive line, made sure they would spin on each side, because one time I had an axle to break.
Yes.
Those axles on the 47 is about like this.
Now the 47, this, now point up there at that gun here before you get to that. That gun on this one is a 75 millimeter, but the 47 you work with had a 90 millimeter. So it's bigger than this gun, about a 13 millimeter or 13 centimeter and a half wider. So
yeah.
And so its trajectory, how far did that shoot? This would shoot 10 miles.
I'm not real sure, but we
7.
had on those firing ranges, they take 2 at a time or so, and then they'd fire over the hills. They had back then, they'd pull the old junk tanks along the valley over there, and those shooters would finish off. I didn't know that they had aircraft engines in back some of those old tanks back then. But I said, there goes a weirdo. Not anymore.
So one bullet, one trajectory would knock the tank out or take more than one. It was a 90.
They probably take a HE, high explosive.
Oh, I see. And then when it hit, it exploded.
Exploded, because the white phosphorus says something else. Yeah.
How many different bullets do you have in there? Bullets or trajectories? Because some of them set phosphorus off, some of them just penetrated.
Yes.
Did you ever see the penetrating one or mostly the phosphorus?
No, most of those high explosives, because they just use this for firing there. Yeah, because see, we had infantry that helped train then for the basics then. We were back in the 39th Infantry for basic training, and firing ranges for that.
Turn over to the side and tell us how you fix that grouser. And how you do those wheels there. Tell us about those wheels. Just talk about that wheel there.
Okay,
talk about the wheel and talk about the grouser there, Paul.
Okay,
Speak up and look this way.
Okay. Well, the biggest thing on that that front end of that thing to hold it from moving that, it is kind of built into that thing. It's a little different. It had more on the front end of that, but it worked below the winch on this.
And you had to have a winch, and you had to open that grouser up, and they're just hooked together.
Kind of front compartment, yeah. Yeah, I've got the picture of an old part of this tank here, the old 47.
We're going to take a look at that now, but look up at that tank up there. Did you have those two little holes where those heads come out up there? You had 3 holes in your tank like this one. You have 5 men in your tank, usually?
No, on these retrievers, they just had 2 there.
Up front, yeah, and then one up top?
Yeah, one on each side. No, the top, they'd sheared that off.
I see.
Because they put a plate, and then they put us mechanics in the back under that plate back there. But that was steel, and that said that's where you sleep at night. And you had a metal top so no boogers could get to you.
Now,
kept you nice and warm.
Did you see any Russian tanks over there? Because the Russians were, we were in the 50s, it was at the Cold War, were we against Russia at that time, or what were we doing? And we were just occupying Germany, make sure they didn't misbehave. Did you see anybody misbehaving over there?
Well, there's some, not really. But,
Yeah.
we had to be ready for what they call a red alert. And so all those tanks had to have, that's what I'd do, go around from tank to tank, make sure that the batteries are clean and covered so that they'd be ready. That's stuck with me all my life. Even down on the farm, I've been known to preach. Keep all your batteries ready so you're ready to start, because the battery will charge you if it's got a bad post, So
How many tanks were around you? You work on 100 different tanks there, and were they all a little bit bigger than this?
Yeah, the old 47, yeah, it was,
We'll get a picture of that here. I'll put it on the camera. Let me see
all right,
which one.
that's the 47.
All right, we'll have a picture of that. That's a 47 here. Okay. All right. That's a 47. That's what you work with. He looks a little different than this tank, doesn't he?
Yeah, and then see, then the retriever.
He's called a Patton 47. Is that Patton?
M47
And then the retriever's right on top of him. Is that the retriever?
Yeah, retriever.
Okay, there's a retriever you just talked about.
That bridge there.
Yeah. And retriever, a bigger engine, a stronger, a bigger.
Retriever only had about 850 horse motor in it.
But it had to pull the other tank somewhere.
Had that, yeah, but he had a gear transmission. You know, you didn't go too fast anyhow.
Like a tractor, real high,
Right.
high torque, but okay.
Yeah.
All right, tell us about the most unique experience you had over there, Paul, and over there in Germany, and what's the most unique thing you saw over there?
Well, the biggest thing I saw, was really, I like the scenery, but being with rubber tracks, you see, we were able to go through those small villages, and we went through a lot of small towns there, and there it was interesting to see the countryside, like these ladies that were working on their little V carts and digging their tubers out of the ground there. That's what all we had to eat, because the rest of the troops going ahead. Because before we left, the old boys there said, "You get those C rations and fill the side of that retriever up, or you go and leave." And I found that those 47 tanks, they had those big long mufflers that made an extra cook stove. I'll tell you what, you could get at least three of those corned beef and hash. You know what, warm up corned beef and hash, because you didn't look like, grease on the top of it. Reese, you'll learn. So sit on that muffler till the top bulges. Now be careful. Then you get it off of there, and you get that little old special tool, put that little leak out, and you got warm corned beef. And when you're going down the countryside, there would be these ladies by those little villages. They'd have these long bread sticks, So you'd have this bread, and then up on the hill is the country still.
Oh, there you go. Gotta bring that in there.
They knew we were drinking. But then the chow truck done went on ahead, and us mechanics back there have to bring up the rest of the bunch. So here all we had was C rations, and of course we had a drink there, but that was different than old beer we have over here. This is like drinking alcohol over here. But it was malt. It's more like had the old malt taste to it. So that's all we had. So
a little stronger.
And C rations. So
but did you see the still? Did you see the smoke coming out of the still like you see it? They don't catch the stills. Did you ever see white smoke coming out of those stills?
Well, not too much.
Yeah.
Because there a little bit. Yeah, I knew if you saw the smoke, you knew there was some good stuff below it.
Was that stronger stuff than our beer, or is it stronger, or just darker, or tasted different?
It was darker. It was mild, and it wasn't that till we got to the lower part of Germany where we had the Bock beer. But you wanted to watch that black stuff, because that black stuff would straighten you out in a hurry. Didn't take too long. So you were off the countryside, because you go about a farmstead and they'd have a water pump out there, but it had a manure pile around the side of it. I'll take the beer. So we had. Yeah, that was an experience. So
tell us about these wheels on here. You had wheels, and when Germany took on Russia, everybody thinks a tank has these grousers, and grousers help distribute the weight. But a lot of tanks just had wheels like a Jeep here. Did you have to repair those, or were they big wheels?
Yeah, these they're solid rubber, and before we'd leave in the spring, we'd have to replace some of those. Yeah, I've got pictures where I've got. But there were 5 crewmen to each tank. So being a specialist, Sarge, You got 2 wheels you're going to have to change there. How's your battery today? Yeah, it's cleaned about 3 weeks. Yeah, you better check it out. So I pull rank on it, but because it had to be a start when you get up there 2 o'clock in the morning. The CO said we got to go to the next firing range. That sucker better start, or somebody's going to look for a crank somewhere. Because they had to have a big battery, because that big battery helped turn the turret. But if it was weak, it would start a little 2-cylinder gasoline engine, because that's what they started these tank motors with. They had auxiliary power down in there. So
Now the tire also, that was a pretty comfortable tire. If it was all solid rubber, I guess it was a real smooth ride in that tank.
yes, wasn't too bad. Yeah,
But not too bumpy.
right. Yeah, I kind of complaining to our farm salesman down there when they first started coming out with rubber tires on these tractors. I said, shoot, these ride awfully hard. So our tanks, they had these torsion bars. They were soft riding. This thing.
Show the torsion bar there that helps with the shocks.
This-
Just like a railroad car, similar to a railroad car there.
Yeah, just it oscillates like that.
Yeah.
This, it has oscillation in there.
And that helps to take the shocks, doesn't it?
Yeah,
And a train looks like that a little bit.
Yeah. And on the tank, they had internal torsion bars and arms on them, but they were round plate. The bearings on the tank was like a big semi has now. So we had to make sure all those bearings were okay on those tanks, because they are holding 47 tons through there.
Point up and stand up there and tell us how thick that steel is up there on that tank, and could those bullets penetrate that? Is that
Steel here, the reason that's why they make it at an angle, so when a shell hits it, it glances off. Yeah, even the HEAP, if it hits, if it's got not too as much of an angle, it'll shed off of there.
And that about 4-inch steel? It's pretty thick there, isn't it?
Yeah. So,
Was this tank better than Russians, or the Russian tanks better than ours?
well, I think we had a better tank, really, because when we'd get a red alert, well, we'd just the crew would just face it outward, so if this front was toward the end of the woods, if anything came by. But but we had to be ready. But those retrievers didn't have as much. We had to have them kind of hid a little behind the tanks, maybe.
How about, did you ever see a Tiger tank over? Because a Tiger tank would have a gun up there as much as 120 millimeters, and yours is only 90. Did you ever see the old Tiger tanks from
No,
Germany?
no,
Or they none of them around? They were all gone?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all we had was those 47s, and then when when I was getting ready to leave, they said they were going to get some newer tanks, the M48, but they weren't as good as the old M47s, because ours were bolted heavily on the front, on the side. Because one time they had a red alert, and new 48 went dashing out through there, and the whole right front bogey broke. Said, give the old thing back. So they had to put heavier bolts in there. So, and they, John said when I left, wrote him again, he said, well, they had to rework the old tanks, give them to the Germans. So I don't know, but then see that started the tank improving revolution around the world. Russia saw, well, they're going to have to start bigger ones, and then we got to the bigger tanks we have now. So I was all in the earlier generation there.
Could you shoot the big projectile up there at the same time you were moving, or did you stop to shoot?
No, they stopped on the ranges, because back then they had areas, marked off for the infantry, and that's what they had to do. So all I did was more or less help get them there, so they do their practice.
Can you go point up to that little hatch up there? That's a periscope on there, and you can't see very much. Did you ever have to sit in there, or did you have to fix those periscopes? Right on the top of that lid there.
I've seen no one of those.
But you didn't have to look out from there, because you can't see very well. You just see about, not a whole 90, maybe 120 degrees.
Yeah, most of our work was running was at night, and those didn't have any lights of a night. Yeah.
Why'd you run at night? Why didn't you run in the daytime? Why'd you have to run at night all the time?
I don't know, but because they did their firing during the day, and then we'd let them rest a little bit. But then we did. I guess we run by day about the fourth of the time, or half the time, maybe half the time probably, because we had according to how wide. Because we went from Graphing there to Harnsfeld's, several of the ranges that are still in operation yet today, training centers.
Have you ever been to Fort Benning in Georgia? That's the train, or the is the capital, or sort of the museums of these tanks. Have you ever had a chance to go
No,
there?
I haven't, no. But I have in where our my youngest daughter lives up there just out of Boston. The fella bought out a whole bunch of tanks out west and brought them out, and he did get a M48 when you're younger. And didn't have a motor. I said, well, I got a motor. I got a picture engine and transmission. So, but yeah, they had heavier wheels on them, and you could see them. Yeah.
What do you recommend to the next generation of kids? You see a lot of kids in Mount Vernon, Evansville. What do you think about what these kids should do? And what do you think we're training them well enough to protecting our freedom?
I think the biggest thing kids can do now is their health. I just get this magazine or newspaper, The Epic Times, and they said in there 80% of the young kids now from 17 to 22 will not pass the military entrance test. So kids need to be less McDonald's. Hate to say that, sorry, but you know, and get their diets down. They call it Mediterranean diets, but you know, nothing wrong with a good beef steak and a rounded diet and exercise. I think the biggest thing this country needs in to fight this virus is health. I didn't take the test, and I've never taken the flu shot that I remember. So I keep my body in good shape. I take a check every year of make sure my vitamin D is up. I'm in top shape, and I do a few exercises every morning.
Amen to that.
And I just keep rolling.
Right there, Paul.
So my body does run, you know.
Yeah.
What about?
I got to get out the shop, makes things are going.
Yeah.
I was supposed to retire, you know, 24 years ago, but I make sure everything's going right because the details are what counts. I'll go around a machine. I kind of look and see what's going to happen next. That's the thing. What I look for, what's going to happen, because nothing like anything that has millions of things with it, make it go. Regardless of what you got, make sure it's ready to work first. Yeah, or it won't go.
Yeah, so a mechanic has to look at everything. You've learned that in your life, that you can't leave anything out. But otherwise, on children, on kids that are growing up, do you think they cherish our freedom, and do they understand what freedom is all about? And like you gave time to the U.S. Army, how can we help kids understand that our freedom is a privilege, not a right?
That's right. I think the schools have missed out on not training our kids the basic of our how we got where we are. You know, they need to go this 1776 program. I think that there's colleges that you can get this online course that they can view. That's what they need to do, study how our basic Constitution was arrived at, and people back then have the same things that we have now of problems. Like in our own family, we found out, my daughter here is a DAR member. Over in Boston here, early last year, they found out through the schoolwork that through the Boston witch trials that one of the little siblings had not been pardoned yet. Isn't that right, Sarah? And they found out that, so they got her pardoned, and part of her ancestry was they found out that they pardoned her. But what happened, people were coming over from England, and they were buying property, and they would say, oh, that guy's a witch, when he was actually maybe doing physical things to help the body, and that was witchcraft. And so they put the man in jail, couldn't pay the taxes. The rich people come out and got the soil. That's the way a lot of land around Boston was purchased back in the early years, yeah.
With the Salem witches.
Salem witchcraft, yeah.
So if we go, you're born in 33, so December 7th of 41 happened when you were about 8 years old. Tell us what you thought about at that time. Tell us what you thought about when D-Day happened. Tell us what you thought about when the atom bomb dropped. And tell us about V-Day, Victory Day.
Well, I thought it was great. I had three uncles that were in World War II. One was in World War I, but Dad's twin brother, and he was in the medical corps, and they walked then. And they had horses, and he was walking back to his infantry division to the fronts one afternoon, and a horseman stopped. Want to ride, soldier? Yes, sir. And happened been one of our president's sons was over there. One of the Roosevelts gave him a ride on his horse. That was World War I. Mom, World War II, Uncle, he was in France, and he came in on the boats, and he said that when he walked through, he wasn't walking on sand.
You're talking about Normandy. December or June 6, 44. Right. He was on D0.
D-Day. Yeah,
D-Day, D0.
And he didn't walk on sand, people. He walked on our good fellows that came in on the boats. But those big ships got in close enough, they bombarded those pillboxes, because they didn't have the, and he said they did. The bombs went over the top of those boxes in. When he got to France, then he took care of all the procurement there for groceries and stuff. And he came home. He'd met a lady over there getting groceries. She was happened to be a French underground lady. She was tart, short, and dark haired, but she was something else. She was a fireball. Yeah, yeah, Aunt Lucille. Yeah, and so he was a lieutenant, and he got all the stuff. And France was so happy. And I have the 39th left France. And that's one of my insignias. The eagle with the sort of a spout, and that the French people made this specially designed for the 39th Infantry, for that special eagle, for the French, for the way we liberated France. So that was, I'm honored to wear that on my Class A uniform. So.
And then when they announced the war was over, or when the atom bomb happened, what did you think about the atom bomb? What did you think about when the war was over?
I thought it was great. Yeah, it saved. I can see the way the Japanese were. They were, following a leader that was a little like some of the others here around the world. They were going to do it or die. And I thought, well, it set millions and millions of lives on both sides. And that's so I think maybe it had to be done, Did you like Harry Truman? What did you think about old Harry? Harry was all right. He had his good days and some, shirt tails, but then, but he got things done.
When he had to discipline MacArthur, because MacArthur sort of did what he wanted, what do you think about that? Because MacArthur was didn't do everything he said for Korea, and then so he had to discipline him.
Yeah. Well, you know what MacArthur said? He said never get in a land battle with Europe, the Asians through there. And that's the same way I feel. My son, we had trouble with the government in drainage on some land where we'd have to send to the Corps of Engineers for just small drainage. it was, nationwide, and my son said, well, down in Antelope, this lady talking about, wanting to come over here from Ukraine. I couldn't put his stuff away. Too late. He married this young lady from Ukraine. She was a major in the Ukrainian EPA. Boy, she's been a fireball ever since. But she was out here at Ivy Tech for 7-8 years, and they moved on. She's been at other Ivy Techs, and now she's at Columbus, and she has, I think, 4 of them up there in charge of them.
Wow.
But we saw right then what can happen when you get people into our government that are working for their own pocket and not good for the government. That's where these young people need to learn the basics of how we got this far, where we are. Think back, one nation and under God, and the good Heavenly Father made this earth for all of us. And it's we've got to be like right where we are. So. And
I'm going to see if anybody else has got questions for you, Paul. Thank you for doing this. And Sarah, tell everybody, he mentioned the DAR. Tell us what the DAR, you're in charge of the region of the DAR, Daughters of the American Revolution, over in Poseyville, right? Or in Posey County?
In Posey County, the Mount Vernon, General Thomas Posey chapter. I'm currently serving as the vice regent. I've served as regent in the past. We're a smaller chapter, but our motto is God, home, country, and so I'm proud of my dad, and I'm proud of the veterans and what they've had to sacrifice. And I would hope that the younger children, that we try to educate them as well. We should not take for granted the freedoms that we do have. And we always have to keep educating and to let them know this, or we're going to forget about it, and then we're going to have things taken away from us that one day we're going to turn around and say, what happened?
Yeah, we became an empire in 1946, the United States, and we've been an empire over 50 years or so, but empires fall, and they fall when we get lazy and we lose the sight of patriotism. So the DAR and the SAR are very patriotic.
Yes.
Not nationalistic, but they're patriotic, and patriotism is important for kids to learn. And the DAR is a mechanism for them to learn about their home, their people that were in the Revolutionary War that helped really when the time was even tougher than Korea and even World War II, and even tougher than some of the more recent skirmishes like Vietnam.
Yes.
Other questions you guys have?
I actually have one, Paul, and I caught up with you here on the latter part of this. I'm a generation after you, but
okay.
I just every word you spoke, I was hanging on to, because I've just been a fanatic about the history of where we've been during that era. I was curious because I didn't catch this. You were working with the retrieval end of it, correct? And you were using, I'm a big mechanical fanatic. I grew up from, when you were talking about batteries and making sure equipment's ready to go, I'm with you, man. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And you had Ford power plants, correct?
Yeah, this was
I
think it's a Ford V8.
Okay. Yeah, and it was an industrial. I know Ford made an industrial side of their complex during that era.
Very dependable, except the water pump once.
Yeah. So, and they were V8s, is that correct? So in the 47 that you're talking about that you were helping retrieve, what were they using for power plants in the 47? Do you remember?
Was in the 47s, that was a V12 Wisconsin.
Oh, Wisconsin.
Air-cooled V12 Wisconsin.
I am familiar with that. I had an uncle actually that served in the subservice, and I knew a lot about the Waukesha's and all those engines, but I'd actually worked on one of those engines one time. Yeah. And they were quite an engine.
Yes. Yeah, I've got a manual yet.
Have you really?
Yes.
Yes, that's cool.
A lieutenant passed it on, and I picked it up. I should have brought it, but yeah, on a V12.
On a V12, and that was always what was so interesting for me growing up in the later generations was it was the air cooled. You
Yes.
know, that was you didn't have to worry about a cooling system as
Right.
far as maintenance wise.
Yeah.
But of course, you have to keep it clean. And,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was the thing then. Air,
Yeah.
you could gasoline would get it anywhere.
Yeah.
Diesel. That's the trouble because they say a little later, well, Russians started getting some diesel power, and the guys could listen in on them. Say they were over there cussing, carrying on, trying to get out there. There's Americans and can't get this thing started.
Yeah.
Gasolines, they were going on.
Oh yeah. I now what years again? I missed what years you were in that front.
I got over there in '54.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
winter '54.
Winter
It was only
54.
21 below zero in the dinner
Oh,
hall.
I can't imagine what you guys went through. I think about those things when I watch documentaries all the time about your era and what you guys went through.
Well, we'd
That's
see
interesting.
that was a Messerschmitt fighter plane base where we were.
Okay.
Had that runway, PT, fall in the morning, out in the morning, mile down and back again every morning.
Yeah.
And I found out, jerk that sweatshirt off
Yeah.
when you were in your room before you went to work, and then you wouldn't catch a cold when you went that back again.
Yeah.
Because a lot of that's some outside work, you know. So I wouldn't sweat in frozen. So I kept my health up. Got to keep his body going.
That's
some way.
right. You hit it on the nail. You got to keep
Yeah.
that body going.
So, and
You gotta
that's
stay
what
in
they
shape.
did then. So, and except then, there toward last, there were some troops coming back from Korea. Korean War was winding down then, you see, when I was there.
Yeah.
And they sent some of those hot sergeants over from Korea there. Yeah, so,
I had an uncle in the subservice during that era.
yeah. So,
Well, I just had one more comment that I wanted to appreciate that you said, and
Yeah.
that had to do from the political realm.
yeah,
And that is the fact that there was one thing that a historian always made sure I understood.
yeah,
And you pretty well hit almost on this very subject.
yeah,
Is that when our forefathers created this country, they never intended for senators and congressmen to be career people. You were there to serve and
Yes.
and to dedicate your time to serve your country.
yeah,
But this whole thing of becoming a lifetime
yeah,
senator and congressman
Yeah.
was actually never really intended.
yeah. Well, Hillsdale College,
Yeah.
I kind of support them some. They don't accept a penny from any people at all. They have online courses for 70, 76,
Yeah.
and these young kids can tie into that.
Yes.
And that's what they need to do, educate our younger kids of
Yeah.
how we arrived at this point.
Exactly.
You know, trouble with these, the squad and some of those up there, they take a piece of history and they politicize it just like George Washington had slaves. So, well, let's go with history, because, just like we had had an Indian in our town and some black shoe, blacks have red blood just like we do.
Amen.
And that Indian, poor old boy, when I get ready to leave, he said, I think they're going to get ready to send me home. I couldn't pass the proficiency test. I felt sorry for him, but
Well, I appreciate you coming here today. I
Yes.
really enjoyed this. I've been in on the last end of this, but this
yeah.
this
Well,
has been
I
great.
wanted to see what this looked like because this, my tank here, this
Mm-hmm.
047, that was my ride.
Yeah.
Except,
Yeah.
except we had a white half track. And we
Okay.
would hide it outside those aircraft
Yeah.
barracks out there
Yeah.
during inspection. And so sometimes we got to sleep in the half track.
You would probably find it amusing. I was born in '56, but I actually worked on an electrical system helping a friend refurbish a half track one time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I enjoyed that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you, Paul, Sarah, appreciate it, and no more questions? Okay, thank you very much, appreciate it.